Hey, everybody, welcome to the Buck Brief. First time on the program, Doug Brunt is with us. He's an author, a podcaster. His latest book is The Mysterious Case of Rudolf Diesel, Genius, Power, and the Deception on the Eve of World War I. He's also got a podcast dedicated. What's the podcast about? Sounds cool.
Well, the podcast, it actually stemmed from a book club I used to be in with a bunch of other writers like Lee Child and Nelson DeMille and Harlan Coben and Amor Tolles. And we'd get together once a month and talk about books and have drinks. And I was talking to some friends at SiriusXM, and they're like, this should be a show. Like, you should have these guys on. So that's really what happens. I start every episode with a guest's favorite cocktail, fix the drink on set, and then we just talk about books and the writing lifestyle and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. If there are writers out there you want to get to know a little bit more about, it's a good way to go.
You know, it's funny. I was actually at a Seder recently with my neighbors, and someone asked me, how'd you get into the CIA? And I started telling them, because it was completely my own. I have no parents or family ties to military, government service, anything like that at all. And I said, honestly, probably Tom Clancy novels. And they were like, wait, really? And then there was a young man who's like the neighbors, who were friends with the neighbor's kid, he's maybe 13 or 14. And I was like, I'm gonna have to get you. He's like, really? And I said, yeah, I'll give you a Tom Clancy novel, and you could see like it just opened this whole world to me. And then after 9/11, I'm like, what am I gonna do? And I was like, I think I'm gonna do Jack Ryan stuff, join the CIA. And sure enough, that's what ended up happening. Yeah. So authors
those books are amazing. One of the few first editions that I have is Hunt for Red October, which is it was the Naval Press, some small press, but that is just a great book and a great movie.
I have a copy of it that I've inscribed to my neighbor downstairs right now that I'm going to be giving him in about a week, because that was sort of my original entree into Jack Ryan. And then I remember I read Without Remorse and Debt of Honor and Some of All Fear. I mean, basically all the ones that have since been made into movies. But I was reading these as a kid, and the two authors that really, I think I have to say changed my life. I mean, I think I joined the CIA because of Tom Clancy. I was a fifth grader. I'm reading these books, or sixth grader, or whatever it was. And the other one would be actually Michael Crichton. I'm kind of a Michael Crichton super fan. I know everyone just knows him for Jurassic Park. Are you a big Michael Crichton guy too? Yeah. I mean, I think he was married 7 times, which was a little sketch, but no one's perfect.
I admire his whole career because he did so many different things. Whatever he wanted to do, he did. He wrote fiction and nonfiction for TV, and he was always in the zeitgeist. Even Jurassic Park is largely about chaos theory, which was very much in the zeitgeist at that time. But Japan taking over the world economically with Rising Sun, and even Disclosure was about workplace harassment long before people were really talking about that.
I love State of Fear, which is him taking the whole climate change catastrophism to task. I thought it was really interesting. I remember some early. We're going to get to news of the day in a moment, everybody. Just hang on. We're doing our own version of his dedicated podcast now. But I remember I used to go back and watch some of these interviews with Crichton, and I thought he was such an interesting guy on many levels. Harvard trained MD, and I think he's the only person that I've ever heard of who was the creator author of the #1 book, the #1 movie, and the #1 TV show in America, all at the same time.
All at the same time, right?
ER, the show.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park, the book. Jurassic Park, the movie. Best-selling book at the time. Obviously the biggest movie in the country at the time. It was a huge box office smash. And then ER was the most popular TV show, I think, in the same year. So it was pretty remarkable.
Died too young. Who knows what he would have been doing by now?
Yeah, I know. It's a shame. He got nailed by cancer. But I just remember him in, I think it was a Charlie Rose interview, which you can probably still see on YouTube. And Charlie Rose is looking at him, and you can tell he was such a big name and clearly a very, very smart guy, very, very successful guy. And Charlie Rose, when Michael Crichton says global warming, climate change, whatever you want to call it, it's happening. It's not a big deal. It doesn't really matter. Everyone needs to calm down. I mean, that's a truncated version. Charlie Rose was like having a fit. He just couldn't. This is 20 years ago. He's just like, what? He goes, I read the data. I know the data. All these scientists who are telling you about the data, all their models are crap. Like, he just gets into it a little bit, and he tries to be he's even like, I like Al Gore, which, dubious, but he's like, I like Al Gore. He's wrong about everything. And I'm just like, more people need to see this interview. But anyway,
I'm going to go find that on YouTube after this.
Yeah, no, it's solid. It's solid. He really makes his way through. But anyway, those two authors changed my life. And I wanted to ask you. Maybe I'll ask you a little bit more about your book, The Mysterious Case of Rudolf Diesel, just because I'm in the process of writing a nonfiction book right now, and I'm actually in the edit stage, right? So I've already handed in my draft, and I'll take any wisdom. Yeah, I'm getting notes, but I'll take any wisdom or advice about getting through the process. But first up, where were? Oh yes. So Megyn Kelly, she's a fabulous radio host and podcaster, and also happens to be your wife, and she is all over the interwebs right now with the clips of her and Bill Maher going back and forth. What did you think about the exchanges that they had, and what were the issues where you feel like, wow, Bill needs to brush up a little bit?
It was amazing. I mean, first of all, she can fact check. She knows her stuff. She's steeped in the news. She's the best prepared person out there. And so they had this interview where he started making all these factual misstatements, and she would correct him. The thing you come away after watching it, she's so classy. She's so smart. She's so prepared. She could have just clubbed him like a harp seal, but she doesn't. She just corrects him. But it happened again and again. She was saying, well, Hillary Clinton was the first to actually deny elections. And Bill Maher's like, she never denied the election. She conceded right away. She says, well, she conceded, and then she went and spent 4 years denying the election validity. And he goes, no, she didn't. And she says, she did. He goes, well, tell me exactly what she said. And she said exactly that. And it's just, there's this awkward pause as he realizes he actually doesn't have the facts. And it happened again and again.
Hillary Clinton, of course, is the original election denier. I'm sure you voted for her in 2016.
Well, she's not an election denier.
She absolutely was the OG election denier.
First of all, she came out before the sun had risen to concede the election to Trump.
And then spent the next 4 years saying he was illegitimate. He was an illegitimate president.
Okay, well, first of all, she didn't say he was an illegitimate.
Yes, she did.
You tell me exactly what she said.
She said those exact words repeatedly.
Okay. I mean, she conceded the election. Whether you're interpreting her disappointment at losing it as the same thing as Trump not conceding it, I don't know if that's where you're getting it from. But again, it's a tremendous false equivalency. You could ask Hillary Clinton right now, who won that election? She will tell you. Donald Trump won the election.
Now she knows she has to because of what Trump has done.
She came out that night
in her dark
purple suit and conceded the election.
Correct. And then spent the next 4 years trying to convince us it was not legitimate.
She's very gracious to her guests, so she could have just gone for the jugular and done that, but she doesn't do that. And her audience is smart. Your audience is smart. Everyone watching can see this and recognize that Bill Maher has embarrassed himself. And so she doesn't need to,
So can I tell you
murder him in the middle of the segment? But
my frustration, my frustration with Bill Maher is I think he sort of sees what's really going on a little bit in the country now. He's been on the wrong side of things for a long time. He's not wrong on everything. He's been good on some issues for a while, but I think he sees more and more of the truth. But he won't really like fully commit to the truth. It's always this game of, well, you guys are right about a few things, but I still hate Trump and he's still going to destroy the country.
That's the main thing. That's the main thing. I think Bill Maher has come around on some of the cultural issues. I think some of the trans things and some of the race things. He's not with the far left on that. He's much more moderate. But you hit the nail on the head. He really has lost his marbles over Trump to the point that he can no longer call balls and strikes. And so not everything Trump does is bad. But he's unable to sort of see anything around that with a level head. So he's just kind of.
Well, I can tell you, it's personal with him and Trump, right? Same way that it is with Joe Scarborough. Same thing. These guys have had interactions, and I know this. I think that the public has this perception that in media we're generally assessing each other as talents or voices or political pundits or whatever it is. But sometimes we actually know each other, and there's some people who we just don't get along with very well. Like, for example, when I was on Megyn's show recently, she brought up Kristi Noem. Kristi Noem is somebody who I have interacted with in the past. Her and I have interacted. Kristi Noem lies and will lie to my face, and I don't like that, right? So whenever someone's asking, well, you sound like you're kind of negative about this or that she's done. I'm like, well, yeah, I'll tell you the truth. Like, I think she's a liar, and I think she's, somebody that shouldn't be in a position of authority. Joe Scarborough and Bill Maher are two guys who have long-standing, call it long-standing beef, whatever you want to say, with Donald Trump. And I think it completely blinds them to the issues of like broader politics right now in a lot of ways, because they can't fully commit, because fully committing means voting for Donald Trump, right? You know what I'm saying? Like he'll say, "Oh, I disagree with them on the trans issue. The BLM stuff was not what it was supposed to be, or it was terrible for the country." I say it's terrible for the country. Biden is like a desiccated, old buffoon. I mean, the whole thing. But he's still going to vote for Joe Biden. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's not really a conversion there.
I agree, and I think with Maher and Trump, there was even some litigation, and
yes,
as we're talking about birth certificates,
the orangutan lawsuit.
Yeah. So I think there's a personal thing, but there might even be something more strategic than that when you look at for example, what Joy Behar was saying. She had Maher on. Maher's out there doing this book tour, and he went on The View, and Joy Behar was saying, well, I really hesitate to say anything negative about Joe Biden. And I think, conversely, probably feels hesitant to say anything positive about Donald Trump, because she's worried about any swing voters, anyone on the fence. She's like, I feel like if I hit Biden, that might put some voters over to Trump. So it's strategic on her part. She can recognize when Biden has massive gaffes or does something really stupid. She just doesn't want to talk about it because she doesn't want to, have that influence the electorate.
Yeah. Well, hold on one sec. We're going to come back to all things Trump world and the news cycle and everything else in just a second. But, this one really hits home for me. There's one guy out there who has shaped my view of politics and economics almost as much as my dad. And it's Porter Stansberry. He's been a friend of mine for a decade. And for the last 25 years, he has predicted almost every major economic and financial move. He has produced a documentary that you absolutely have to see. And I think the title of it tells you what he's thinking. He calls it America's Last Election. It details how there's a new financial crisis brewing. Look at the $34 trillion of debt we have and the dangers it could pose to your finances and your future. So if you own any stocks, bonds, or just have cash in the bank or own your home, you've got to watch this documentary. Go to lastelectionplot.com. That's lastelectionplot.com, paid for by Porter and Company. Doug, what do you think happens if there's a guilty verdict in New York against Donald Trump?
I don't know. In terms of the outcome of the election?
Yeah, I mean in terms of the politics. I don't think anyone knows what they think the punishment's going to be. That's crazy. But I'm just saying, if there's a guilty verdict, does it really matter? You think Trump still stays ahead in the polls?
I think it's kind of baked into the polls already.
Yeah,
I think people, anyone sort of watching or even loosely watching, just sort of, kind of sees things for what it is. The actual guilty verdict, that is a difference, but I just feel like it's sort of baked into the numbers already.
Well, I also feel like a guilty verdict for a thing that is bad, right? If someone says this guy's guilty of armed robbery, or like this guy's guilty of, hitting an old lady over the head with a lead pipe to steal her bag, you go, oh. A guilty verdict on business records that are a misdemeanor, but maybe a felony for an unnamed federal election issue that they don't even tell us what it is, that he's not even been convicted for. I mean, it is the vaguest, crappiest criminal case I've ever seen in my life. I've actually never seen a flimsier criminal indictment. And I even have Democrat DA friends in New York who work for the DA's office who will admit that. Like, they can't say it out loud because they'll get fired, but they know this is garbage.
Yeah, I think enough people know that and have been talking about that. And the Fannie Willis stuff, which is a totally separate thing, but was so absurd and got so much national attention that I think in the minds of a lot of people, these are all sort of lumped together as these things that are clawed together by his political opponents to come after him. Like, you're really supposed to prosecute crime in America, not prosecute people. So, but we've decided to sort of prosecute this person as opposed to any particular crimes. And so I think people see that.
Yeah, and I always remind everyone, it couldn't be more obvious that these were all prosecutions that were held for political impact, right? Meaning that they could have been brought much sooner. In the case of New York, there's nothing. In fact, it's past the statute of limitations. It was past the statute of limitations. They created a pretext to extend the statute of limitations, and then within the new statute of limitations, waited until the election year. I mean, so it's all very obvious, and so I think they've created an environment where even if you recognize some of Trump's flaws, and like I find Trump, again, I know him, right? I mean, sure, you've met Trump in the past. I've
He
known
gave
Trump.
me the handshake one time, which I was ticked off about.
What
You know, the famous handshake where he'll like sort of reach out, he reaches way out, and then he pulls you in, you know, he sort of jerks you off your feet.
Oh, he gave you one of
He
those?
does this. Oh, yeah. This was years ago. This was probably 2014 or something. We were at Madison Square Garden for a hockey game or something. And I met him briefly there. And, you know, it actually wasn't there. I did see him there once, but it was at the Geraldo Rivera was doing the Celebrity Apprentice.
Okay.
And so Trump was there to
Yeah.
do that. So years ago. But yeah, he's sort of famous for having this tactic to sort of get you off your game a little bit. So he reaches far out, but he braces himself. And then when you shake his hand, he pulls you. So you come like sort of fumbling into him a little bit. And afterward, I was like, did you see what he did? That was so ridiculous. And then, of course, I look for it on TV, and you see it every once in a while.
Last time I saw him, he gave me a vanilla milkshake that I didn't even ask for. So I was like, okay.
Oh, that's nice.
He's got, yeah, exactly. He's got different strokes with different folks. But I think there's a
get a firm, you know, get a wide base the next time you shake his hand. Be ready for it.
Okay. But I was going to say, I think that there's a case to be made for people voting for Trump just as a protest vote against all the stuff that they're doing, because the stuff that they're doing is completely outrageous. Yeah. And it's so bad. I say this, and I know it's easier said than, you know, you can't prove it, right? But if they were doing this to a Democrat, I'd be like, guys, we can't do this. We can't have a Republican administration overseeing effectively. I know they say, oh, it's all separate. That's nonsense. 4 criminal indictments of their chief political opponent. Like, this is honestly, if I was still in the CIA, we'd be looking at some country doing this like, oh, how long before the coup? You know what I mean? It's not good.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's outrage. You know, we don't like to see our former presidents prosecuted like this, especially on these kind of things. I think it probably has outraged a lot of people and may backfire, you know, on Democrats.
Doug, you ever go shooting? You a gun guy?
I have. You know, I grew up, my grandfather and my dad were big duck hunters. And actually, my grandfather even was a bit of a deer hunter, too, although I never did that. But I did go duck hunting a lot as a kid. So, you know, reading the blind and then putting out the decoys in the dark of night, waiting for the sun to come up in a freezing February morning in New Jersey. So did do a lot of that as a kid. It's been a while, though.
Well, I actually don't do much. I don't do hunting, but I do like tactical training at a range. And if you ever make your way down to South Florida, we'll take you out. The Sexton brothers, we've got arsenals and we go shooting all the time. We've got like silencers and all kinds of fun stuff, short-barreled rifles.
Oh my God, I love that.
Oh yeah. Cool. Oh yeah. But we'll get you out on a day where you can shoot some Bear Creek Arsenal too. Bear Creek Arsenal, sponsor of the segment of the podcast right now, and they make amazing precision firearms. The best value for the craftsmanship and the accuracy you get anywhere in the firearms industry. I visited with these guys in North Carolina. They have an amazing factory. They're all gun people, Second Amendment people. They really believe in what they're doing. Handguns, rifles, all kinds of calibers. They've got great uppers if you want to change out something in your AR platform. The uppers they have are phenomenal. But honestly, they're fully formed rifles. I've got 2 of them here now at home. They're amazing. Go to bearcreekarsenal.com/Buck. Use promo code Buck to get 10% off your first order. That's bearcreekarsenal.com/Buck. Use promo code Buck for 10% off your first order. Doug, do you want to talk about you're working on another? I've got the mysterious case of Rudolf Diesel here, and it strikes me as like a very German name. Every time I say it, I want to be like Rudolf Diesel, yeah.
He is German,
yeah. But do you want to talk about your next project? What are you working on right now?
Well, the next project is, I haven't announced what it is exactly, but I will tell you it's from that same period of time. The Diesel book is the quarter century before World War I in Europe, and it's about Rudolf Diesel, who invented the diesel engine, and he disappears on the eve of World War I, right as the diesel engine, you know, had emerged as the only way to operate a submarine or a U-boat. So the Kaiser was very interested in Rudolf Diesel, and he was still the sort of main guy who could make a diesel engine work for a U-boat. He disappeared, and there were all sorts of murder theories about what happened to him. And I'm sticking in that same time period, and it'll be the same kind of thing. It's things you don't know about people you do.
If you had to give somebody, if you had a friend who was like, oh, I'm going on vacation for a week, I can only bring 1 book, forget about Kindles, only bring 1 book, and I just want to really enjoy the read. Nonfiction. I don't talk fiction here. Nonfiction. what would be your recommendation for somebody? I mean, just like your what is your can't miss, I think you'll enjoy this nonfiction book, other than your own, of course. They should already have a copy of The Mysterious Case of Rudolf Diesel.
Well, they should. I mean, people are saying it's the best book of the year, of course, Diesel. Outside of that, though, I would go back to an early book by Barbara Tuchman. If you got vacation, you don't want a big doorstop, there's one called The Zimmerman Telegram by Barbara Tuchman.
First World
She
War.
is a terrific writer. Yeah, and it sort of gets to, it wasn't the Lusitania so much that got us into the war. That happened years before we got in.
It was the Germans trying to get the Mexicans to open up another front on our doorstep. That's kind of a rough one.
Exactly right. Yeah, and the sort of British intel intercepts it, and so rather than the Germans getting Mexico to come after us and keep us busy over on our hemisphere, we intercept this thing and we jump in. So, and she's just a beautiful writer, and it's a great book, and it's a fairly short one.
I have on my shelf right here. It is a bit of a doorstop, but I have A Distant Mirror. I haven't read it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
that's
is
a
it
great
13th
one.
century or 14th century? I can't remember.
Yeah, I just ripped through Rubicon, which I feel like everyone's read, and this one's right next to it. So I think that's next on the list. So I will get to it after I get to The Mysterious Case of Rudolf Diesel. Doug, fun to hang out with you, man. I appreciate it. Good luck on the next project. We'll have you on when you want to talk about it. And next time you have like cigars, and I don't smoke cigars, but it makes it sound cooler. Cigars and book club meeting. Let me know. I'll if I'm in town, I'll swing by.
That would be great. Whiskey. How about that?
Whiskey. That I can do. I can do whiskey for sure. Doug Brunt, awesome. Everybody, check out his latest and subscribe to Dedicated Podcast. There you go. Thank you.
Thanks, Buck.